Hi. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Thank Buzz for the invitation. And I really love having exhibitions there. I am in between my living room and my dining room, right?
Okay.
And, yeah, so I'm in my house. And let's see if you see that.
So that's your studio for now.
Yes, that in my living room. I mean, actually, it's the only place I have where to sit right now. Because everything is being covered either by silk screens or just all over. I created a silk screen station in the back using a picnic table. It's taken over, yes, because of the studios being closed.
Right. And I just wanted to mention to everyone, I'm sorry we were late joining in. We had some technical difficulties. Just so you know, I got kicked off at the very last minute and I had to log back on. So we're a little bit nervous. So hopefully everything will go smoothly. If you have any questions, please put them through the chat and then I'll try to get them to Maria during our conversation. So Maria's going to share her screen now and show us some of the things that she's been working on.
Yes. Yes, can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so in a way, it's going to be almost a journey from after I graduated from my undergrad. Not in detail, so you're going to see I'm going to be skipping some years.
So Maria, you did your undergrad at New York University.
At New York University, yes.
And you were doing your undergrad, was it in painting or is it video? Or?
It's called studio art.
Studio art.
Studio art, and I had a sort of minor in literature, and I say a sort of because our students were not allowed to have a minor because they would only give us 2 credits per class, per art classes. They would not give us the full 3 credits. So we were always carrying 6 classes or something like that. But one of the things I do love is research and literature and languages, and that's going to come through in a lot of the work that I do, especially when I start working in video. No, video I learned after I graduated, because when I was at NYU, I found out that Tisch School of the Arts is one of the best film schools in the country, and I wanted to take classes there, but they were not into interdisciplinary studies at that time, and they told me, well, you can, but you have to leave the studio art, and I didn't want to do that. So I went in because of drawing. I presented a drawing portfolio. Remember, we're talking about the 70s. There were no magnet programs, nothing like that. And I just drew in my house. And an art teacher in my high school, I went to Miami Springs Senior High. He said, you should apply to New York. And so I went and applied. I said, New York University, and that's where I applied. I come from a working class immigrant family in Hialeah, and those of you that are not from South Florida or from Miami, Hialeah, so it's primarily a working class neighborhood. And I decided to start the talk with this particular self-portrait because I want to give you that background, because that background has been extremely important for a lot of my work, the work about the women, but also even the Fulbright, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And this is a self-portrait, obviously. I think it's obvious.
Your glasses are different.
My glasses, because I broke those glasses.
Oh, okay. Because you have red glasses on today. Yeah.
Yeah, I broke those. So now these are from CVS, and I have to go and get real glasses. But anyway, yes. And I'm wearing an apron. In this case, it was my art apron. And I have the portraits of my dad. My mom by then had died. And my brothers and my cousins, whom I consider my brother, my aunt who raised us, and my uncle, her husband, and my grandmother. Anyway, this was 1962, and this is a house that we lived in Miami, Northwest Miami, and the car my dad had. My family itself, my father, mother, the brother that follows me, myself, we came first in 1954. We were immigrants. We were not Cuban refugees. And they came to work, and they went to New York first. They hated New York, and they came to Miami, and we used to go to Key West and take the ferry and go to Havana. So I was raised between Havana and Miami until I was around 10. Actually, around 10. My mom died when I was around 8. And I was sent to Cuba. And then when my aunt came, and she and her husband and my cousins did come as refugees, we came with them, my brothers and I. So this picture is from there, 1962. And this is my background. Again, my mother was a factory worker, a seamstress. My dad also worked in a factory. And my aunt, whom I consider my second mother, she was a tailor. She would measure you and she would make your wedding dress or the tuxedo for your groom or whatever. So anyway, and that sewing aspect is going to come back later on in the art. Okay, so now I'm going to go all the way to, don't tell me now we're having
technical. So this is on the left of your painting. That was representing Cuba, correct?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. Both the right and the left. On the right, that's me with my mom in Havana. That's the building where we lived in Havana, which was destroyed at the beginning of the revolution, just because we're going to build up a building, and they never did. I believe it's a park now. But it's a historical building. It was a Spanish historical building. And the left is what I remember a lot about Havana, which is the ocean hitting the seawall. We used to go there in the afternoon to El Malecón. Used to go there every afternoon just for walks. So I have such a vivid picture of that ocean hitting the seawall. So yeah.
And this is mixed media. It's oil.
Yes, watercolor, acrylic, and then the faces are done, not my face, but the little faces, my family's faces are done in watercolor, in oil, I'm sorry. But underneath there's acrylic, because it is paper, it's handmade watercolor paper. So yeah, so it is mixed media. Yes, I consider myself a multidisciplinary artist because I don't consider myself a painter that much. I draw. I love to work on paper more than on canvas for some reason, although I've done it, but some reason. Anyway, but we'll talk more about that. I'm going to jump all the way to after I graduated from NYU. I'm not sure if I finished saying that. I learned video after I graduated. I couldn't change to teach School of the Arts, or I didn't want to. And so I learned video with an NGO, the Downtown Community TV Center, that they were teaching video for free. And I became their first employee because they said I had a good eye for camera. And I was so proud, I was like 23, 24. Oh, well, I'm an artist. That was my reply. But anyway, I learned video production with them. And we're talking about open reel camera. So it's a whole different story than digital. Okay, then at NYU, I started working in sculpture, although this particular piece was done after I graduated. I love sculpture because I could use different materials, I could hammer, I could just cut things, where I already knew how to draw, so I feel I wasn't being challenged. So I had started sculpture during my undergrad, but this one I did right after I graduated. And these are casts, these are latex casts of actual women that for some reason they allow me to cast part of their bodies, And I sewed this together. Again, here goes back to sewing. The one in the center, she has a cesarean scar because my aunt allowed me to also make a cast of her cesarean scar. So I do not own this piece anymore because it got this, I don't own it. It got destroyed. I just,
But these were life size, correct, Maria?
These were life size. These were life size, yes. I just had them hanging in my tiny apartment on 15th Street in Manhattan. And perhaps that's why my roommate and I didn't get along very well, because this is what I would hang on the wall.
Well, I would have been very happy to be your roommate, to have that hanging on the wall. I'm glad you have an image of it. So I'm sorry that you don't have it anymore. So.
Yeah, me too. When I look at some of these, sometimes I feel they're so much stronger than what I do today. But anyway, so then I keep on, for some reason, there we go. Then again, we're in the mid-1970s, 1974. I did some pieces of which I really only have one, actually two. But here in this presentation, I do have two. This piece also got destroyed when I came from New York. I just didn't have the means to carry a lot of my sculpture, and about women in prison. Because one of my jobs right after I graduated was teaching drawing in a men's detention center in New York City. And the organization Hospital Audiences, they would also take performances to different in prison or also hospitals, any institutionalized people. I worked in the part of the prisons, and I did get to go to Rikers Island, both the men's prison and the women's prison. In fact, I went to Sing Sing once, which that's kind of creepy. I had, bodyguards left and right of me, and I would go as a photographer, not as a photographer of the prisoners, but of the performers. And anyway, I did see pregnant women in prison, and I asked the warden, what happened to the baby, and she told me that, of course, they would give birth in prison and some sort of clinic that they would be taken to, and then they would stay with the baby. I believe it's 3 months. I would have to research that right now because that's what I recall. And then the baby will be given either to family members or to foster care. So in my mind, and here I'm like, I'm 23 years old. In my mind, I'm thinking, this child is just skipping socialization. They're just going right into, they don't even get to have a regular life. They just skip socialization and go right into prison. And we have to remember, to this day, most women are in prison for two reasons. One reason is that they're in some form of drug deal with usually their partners. And the second reason, they kill their partners because of domestic violence, because they get fed up of being beaten up. And they end up in prisons because of that. In fact, this year, the Human Rights Watch has an incredible documentary called Belly of the Beast, which is going to be released now, I believe, at the end of this month, about women in prison in the US and how they even get sterilized without their consent. But anyway,
wow.
A lot of the research, I do a lot of research in many ways, both in literature and all kinds of, but also a lot of my imagery, not this one in particular, but a lot of the imagery comes from either Human Rights Watch, Doctors Without Borders, of which I'm a member. I'm not a medical person, but I've been donating for years, a little bit, but I've been donating, and also the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. I do have this particular piece here in my house in storage. Okay, this is latex, and like I said before, I love just sculpture that could work with many materials. And the first piece I show, not the one of my self-portrait, which that's a work on paper, but the sculpture is also cast latex. In this case, what I did, I mixed it with acrylic, and that way it gives you more a feeling of human skin, and I can control a little bit more the colors. And a lot of my pieces at that time dealt with women and their redefining of themselves. Instead of following just society, whatever society wanted them to be, that they could make a decision out of their own life. So it's kind of a rebirth, a passage. And again, I use my aunt's cesarean scar. The face and the hand are mine. They're cast of me, and it's kind of this rebirth of myself, I suppose. And I exhibited this in Miami. I had just had a one-person show in New York in Soho, when Soho was affordable to artists. I guess now maybe after the pandemic it might end up being affordable again, but I just had a one-person show, and I showed this in Miami, and I was told that one of the secretary requested to have a plant in front of it because it was just too strong. She couldn't deal with it going into her office.
Oh, wow. So the title Passage, I mean, that means more than just birth. I mean, it makes me think of migration and all these other things.
Yes, I didn't think of it before, but you mentioned that the other day, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's true, because migration is a passage from your
subconsciously, right?
Yeah. And I'll talk more about other pieces on migration. Also the fact that myself and my parents, we came after the revolution. You know, there was a huge immigrant community in New York, in Key West, in Tampa, and actually, traditionally, historically, they helped financially for the War of Independence. Obviously, not my dad, because you know we were not there during the War of Independence, but in the 50s, there was a huge immigrant from the Caribbean to New York City to some of these parts. It's not only after the revolution, of course, not as huge as after the revolution, obviously, but a lot of people don't know about us. You know, they know more about the refugees and whatnot, which is fine, but I'm just letting you know. Okay, okay, when I came back to Miami, I wanted to see if I could still draw. There's always this question. So one of my brothers was cerebral palsy, and so I did a series of pen and ink drawings of him. I'm only going to show 2, but I figured that, yeah, I guess I can still draw. And he didn't like his photograph to be taken, but for some reason he loved that I take his photograph. And although these are not drawn from a photograph, these are drawn from him. Of course, he was a passive model because he couldn't walk. But he liked them. I used to show them to him.
They're wonderful.
Thank you. I've never exhibited those. Okay, I'm jumping a lot right now. Going back to sculpture, I had been working with latex. I loved the casting process. I've been casting in plaster and latex. And then I decided, I learned that had this program called Art After Dark, and I could there's a community program, I could take a workshop on how to learn how to cast bronze. So I decided to take it. Frida Schumi, who's a longtime, very, very close friend of mine, she taught it, and I learned it from her. Eventually, at like 8 sculptors, we created the Foundry Guild at at the Foundry there, and then I started teaching the beginning class in bronze casting. I became a welder. I used to even weld for some of the other artists that were afraid of it. So this is one of the pieces that I did there, and I'm only going to show 2, just to show you. And towards the end of when the decided to close the foundry, I was doing more this type of thing. I was actually making molds of the molds, or making cast, of the molds, because there were more abstract pieces, and just welding them together. And I had a lot of fun welding. I made a lot of creative decision with the welding. But anyway, decides.
What's the scale of these, Maria? What were the scale of these?
Yeah, they're taller than me, but that doesn't mean anything. I'm only 5'3". I should have looked that up.
Oh, so they're like life size.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And what does the lady mean?
That's a belly dancing dance, and I was taking belly dancing, but I'm not good at it. I love the music, Arabic music, but I couldn't get into it to dance it. So I could do it. I could do the movement with Cuban music, but not with Arab, Middle Eastern music. So I'm not very, I was never
they're
very
dancing. Good. So they're dancing. Nice.
They're kind of
do you still have these?
Yes, these I do have. Where? Well, my backyard, the ones that are painted are actually in my utility room. Yeah, I know. Well, that's another problem with sculpture, which comes to what I'm going to talk about now is once I'll talk about that in a second. I did, even though the did close, I made these small reliefs, and I made very few of them. Because I love reliefs, you're working on the middle ground. Again, I go back to storytelling. I do love narrative. That's why I love literature. And so I decided to make these and cast them in plaster, cast them in latex. I could not cast them in bronze because by then the had closed the foundry, the Bronx foundry, because they do have a wonderful glass foundry, but I never got into the glass thing. The other day, somebody asked me if the one on the left is cast in chocolate, and I said no, but that would be wonderful to cast it in chocolate. Anyway,
I have someone asking about the dimensions of these reliefs.
Oh gosh, about this size. I guess about
Like 2 feet?
a little less than that. These I can send you that info later, which is not going to help the participants. But if anybody wants to know, just let me know. Sorry, I should have had that. I've been a little overwhelmed.
That's okay. You haven't been doing it. Just so you all know, Maria just got her exhibition up last week. Then she was invited to be part of the FAMA exhibition, which is Fibers Arts Miami Association, and they're doing a flag exhibition for suffrage anniversary of voting for women. So she just submitted that Saturday. So you've been a little busy. And then she was doing this. And you had another art talk.
And I had another art talk, which you're going to put the link on the chat, which actually deals very specifically to the exhibition I have at the Larson Gallery, which I'm going to only touch on here.
And I'll put the link in for the exhibition and for that talk as well for you.
And everybody, by the way, Colette also has a flag in the FAMA exhibition. We both do. Okay. So anyway, basically, this is the end of more traditional sculpture, if you like, in the sense that I consider installations to be sculpture. You're working with different materials. You're working the space that you have. So those are also sculptures. And I was doing installations since the 1970s. In my one-person show in New York, I did do installations that people, which by the way, there was one that people could only walk a certain path, and I only did delineate the path with tape on the floor. And to my surprise, participants actually followed the path, although there were no barriers. But anyway, that's a different story. Okay, so once the closes the foundry and I stopped working with bronze, I just couldn't afford a commercial foundry. And the other foundry they had was in Homestead, and just the driving was a little bit too much. I don't live in Coral Gables, I live in South Miami, but I'm very close to UM anyway. And having to drive to Homestead, it was too much. And I was also teaching. Anyway, so I asked myself, what do you like to do? And I love to travel. And I'll travel not only to Europe and all that, that's so, we all like, but, I love to, I've been to tiny little towns in the Andes. And I mean, I've been to as many places as I can, and there's still a lot of places I would like to go. So of course, bronze is not the best media for that, but video is. Video is wonderful. The other thing I like, which I've mentioned, are narrative stories. So, and this one starts also the migration. So this one's called Sirens Waters because I worked with that legend that many cultures that have coastal cultures have legends about who are the mermaids, what are the mermaids. And then men throw themselves into the ocean because of the hear of the sirens, singing. So I asked a former student of mine, Cristina Molina, who's now a professor in her own right and an artist, a professional artist in her own right, to model for me and two of her cousins. So she was my official assistant, and we just put the camera in a plastic bag because I did not have an underwater camera, and we went and did this underwater shoot. In the middle, I used news footage of barceros, of boat people. In this case, they're Cuban, but it doesn't really matter. This is something that happens not only with Cubans and the Haitians in the Caribbean, but in the Mediterranean. We've seen it every day, and in Southeast Asia, right? And people dying because they're trying to escape. Sometimes, of course, you go into the ocean because you just want to venture, but nobody goes into the ocean in a raft for a venture. They do it for escape. So I created this piece, which is in the Larson show. This one is in the Larson show. Video. So I started working more with video. This one's also in the Larson show, and this is strictly news. I used just a few seconds, but I re-edited it. You have these people in the middle of the ocean, but they have no water. So you're like, but you're in the middle of the ocean. How can you not have water? Of course, they don't have drinking water. They don't have fresh water. And they throw, this is shot from a helicopter. They throw a bottle of water, and this guy just jumps from the boat, not the boat, the raft, to swim and get this bottle. I even thought of changing the title to The Trophy, because this bottle of water becomes a trophy. And I edited it in such a way that he never gets back to the boat. It's exasperating for me when I watch this particular piece. It exasperates me, even though I was the one that made it. Okay, I'm going to go a little faster. Here we go with the Fulbright. This is part of my series, Manos Trabajadoras, Working Hands, of women's manual labor. And what I do, I consider this like an art documentary series where I'm documenting their work, but what I'm emphasizing is the repetitive rhythm of their work, of their hands working. This one was in a one-person show at the Frost Art Museum. I thank Carol Damien, who was the director at that time, the curator, Ana Esterada, who invited me out. Ana actually introduced me to this lady. She is a Shipibo, which is a part of an ethnic group in the Peruvian Amazon, who have been displaced from their places in their Amazon. On top on the left, I'm in her house in Pucallpa, where I used to visit for 9 days and film her. The one on the right is my apartment, the apartment that I rented in Lima. And here I am in the lower left hand, and this is the collaborative textile that we created. The ocean scene, that's also in Lima, like 5-6 blocks from where I lived. So.
Can you just talk about your the Fulbright, about the process and all of that for some of the students that are on, so they understand the process and how long you were there?
Yes.
What that was like.
Right. In my case, because I already had a terminal degree, I already had my MFA, I applied as a scholar, with a Fulbright US scholar. And the reason I selected Peru is I met this other woman who was a domestic worker, and she was extremely, and I say she was because she passed away, extremely spiritual. And I started filming her while she was cooking, and I said, you know what, I'm going to make a proposal. And she said, working hands. So that's why I call it Working Hand, Juana. Then I did get it, and I was there with the Fulbright itself for a month. However, I stayed 9 months. Altogether 9 months. What they did, they extended my visa. I did not get my fee, the extra month. You know, they pay me for the 4 months. You also have to, in my case, I also had to teach because I had a teaching research. Now, if you're in between your undergrad, your bachelor, and your master's, you apply for a Fulbright student grant. I believe it's 9 months, but Regina was saying that they had it for 11 months. I'm assuming depending on the country. So actually you get to be there longer to do your research. And sometimes also take classes in whatever country you decide or you apply to. So would be very interested in applying for another Fulbright as soon as I can.
So Maria, you've been to Peru how many times during research?
Yeah, and then I go every year. And because part of the Fulbright, the main really, it's very academic, but really they really focus on people to people. It's for people from other countries to understand people from the U.S. and people from the U.S. to understand people from the other country. And it's really it was an incredible experience. And in Peru, so I've gone 10 times. So because that, you have to have some connection with the NGO. You could be a chemist and be teaching chemistry in a university in whatever country. You still need to have some contact with a community organization. At least when I applied, and I was there 2011, 2012, that's how it still is, but you know, I'm also going to talk about my own experience. And then I've been going every year because I'm in contact with the NGO it's actually an NGO that's trying to eradicate child domestic workers. So I go and they introduce me to other women, and I've been to their hometowns in the Andes. Now, in the case of Olga, no. In the case of Olga, I met her through the curator Ana Esterada, because Olga is also a shaman. She does the ayahuasca ceremony.
So Olga is the lady in your video.
In this particular video, yes. Let me see. Let me see if the next one. Actually, this is another video from the Fulbright. It's in Huancabamba. Huancabamba is it's Andean town close to the Ecuadorian border in the north of Peru, close to. And this lady told me, you know, you can film me cooking, but I'm not going to say a word. You make me nervous and your camera makes me nervous, which I understand because I don't like to be in front of cameras myself. So, but I said, but are you sure I can film while you're cooking? She said, yeah, that's fine. And I'm very happy Digital Oculus was at MBUS, and this link still works. They actually, I'm very grateful to MBUS that the link to the catalog still works. So that's also from
nice. Very
good. So I've been working out this particular one. I did go during my Fulbright, but you're going to see others like the ones I have here at this other MBUS, except one person show I had. The video I have here was done years after the Fulbright. It's just one of the friends that I met during the Fulbright in that NGO. They invited me to their hometown. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. So this was bread work, and you have a whole bunch of different kinds of bread, but especially Cuban bread painted on the bag where they come in. And the reasons Cuban bread is I had been invited to an exhibition in Cyprus, in Nicosia, Cyprus, by Inés Amado, and she has this constant research called Bread Matters, and you had to use the bread of your native country. And I found out that Cuban bread used to be like French bread, or not like French bread, like Italian bread, you know, nice and very compact. You know, Cuban bread, those of you that know it, it's very airy. But during the war against Spain, during the independence war, the bakers started stretching it. So anyway, I used to take it to to the print room, although these are paintings, these are not print room, and all the other artists would, because it smells so good, you know, it's bread, and people would ask me, can we have some bread? And I said, you have to wait till I finish painting. Anyway, so here's another shot. I had also, when I was still at the Bronx Foundry, I had done some casts of breads, of different types of breads. I felt bad because, of course, you can't eat the bread once you make a mold out of it because it's full of latex and plaster and whatnot. But 3 of those pieces were there in that exhibition at MBUS.
Okay, that's where we met. I met you at MBUS during that exhibition. I think Jacek was the one who curated. I was like assisting Jacek.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. And this is one of the videos, or 2 videos, but one of the videos at that exhibition, which I really love. I'm sorry, for me, it's one of my best videos, modesty aside. And again, the woman on the upper left hand, that's Susana, and she was also a domestic worker. She's now a community leader. I've done a few videos of her doing community work in Lima, in the outskirts, in the Pueblo Nuevos, that they're called, you know, the favelas of Lima. And this is her cousin's house. This little girl was 4 years old, Geraldine, and she loves to sing. So she sang for the video. And now her cousin, Susana's cousin, Esperanza, she made bread for the Day of the Dead. So they call it Tantawawa. In fact, I think I should have called the video Tantawawa. Tanta meaning bread in Quechua, and Wawa meaning baby. Now, I spent hours just filming this woman. This is a one-day thing. This woman kneading the dough. And I used to get tired of just seeing her knead the dough. So anyway, but she doesn't talk about her life. They talk more about the bread and about the celebration, not about the life. I do not interview the women formally. What I let them talk about whatever they want to talk, and I do follow-up questions. So if they want to talk about their lives, like the Olga the Shipibo woman, she talked a lot. She's like the Shipibo version of a feminist is what the curator used to call her. She did talk a lot about the condition of girls and women in the Amazon, at least in their ethnic group, and especially after they've been displaced and to Lima. But Esperanza, this is her house, and it's an adobe home. And they were wonderful. I stayed there with them. And anyway, it was a wonderful experience. You can see an excerpt of it in my website also, but I can't talk too much about each piece because I know the time is limited. Okay, so now we come again back to sewing, and this is a monotype. These are my aunt's hand. They're based on a photograph I had done of her sewing. And the quote is from one of my cousin who wrote me, and she said, what I do remember from a young age, she used to sew. You know, she started sewing very fine linen, guayabera, and those of you that are from South Florida or you've been to some parts of Mexico, so they use the traditional guayabera is made of very fine linen with embroidery and whatnot. And this is the job that she had as a paying job before she got married when she was young in Cuba. Like I said, she was a tailor, not only a seamstress, but she was a tailor. So I'm going to go back. The reason I want to show you this, especially look at the one on the upper left hand, because that becomes part of an image in some pieces that are at the, actually it's not in the exhibition, but of the textiles I'm working on, but it's not in the exhibition. Okay, so this one also, these hands also show up, so.
I love these hands. I know I told you this earlier. They remind me of the creation of Adam. And,
yes,
and I also love that they're sewing, you know, and it represents labor and so many things. That I love
yes.
this.
And it goes back, and I'm thinking, for example, going back to the Fulbright, when I wrote the proposal, well, why am I doing this thing with working hands? I mean, I was very lucky. Not only I never had to, to be a domestic worker, work in a factory. My father insisted that I would not end up in a factory. He told me that. I mean, none of the women in my family were domestic workers, but they worked in factory. And he told me, no, you're not ending up in a factory. So even when I got the scholarship in New York, some of the neighbors told him that I would be, I would get into drugs, blah, blah, blah. And he said, she's going to have a university degree. She's not going to be in a factory. So, I'm very grateful to these women. And later on, in fact, the next slide, when I start sewing again, because I know how to sew, I'm not a tailor. I cannot make your wedding dress unless I have a pattern. But I know how to sew. But I stopped sewing when I went off to college. I just didn't have the time with the studies. And I hadn't done it in years until the pandemic. And I found out that, as we all did, that our healthcare workers did not have the proper PPE. So I have two nieces who are nurses and a third niece who is in imaging specialists, whatever exactly they're called, X-rays and MRIs. And so I started sewing again. I ended up making 100, and
These
I found
are beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Like 140 masks to donate. I kept 3. And at one point, I really needed a break, and I did some silk screens and created the ones on the top left where I'm modeling those. I did not give out, and I don't even use them. They're just kind of like maybe in the future.
They're art masks. So I have someone asking me if they can, where they can purchase your mask. So maybe if they go to your website, you might. I don't think you're selling them right now, but those were all donated. Yeah, they were all donated.
And I do have some cut because some friends of mine in Peru asked me for masks, but at one point they told me, but don't mail them because even our post office is kind of failing right now. So I have them there for them. And I don't know, probably this year I won't be able to go to New York, neither New York nor Peru. 2 of my favorite, I'm sorry, but I adore New York. I had such a wonderful
Who doesn't love New York?
Yeah.
Me?
the 11 years I lived there marked my life so
I can
deeply.
imagine how great that was. I would have loved that. Yeah, that's one regret I have. I never lived in New York. I don't think I would want to live there now, but when I
Well,
was
you know,
younger.
apartments are cheaper, I've been told. But anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we go back to sewing. And the other thing I wanted to say about this, the people that I donated, the people that I know, I asked them to take photographs of themselves wearing the mask and to send it to me. And that's going to come up later for the flag exhibition. Now, of course, I don't have photographs of everybody because I did send to my nieces who are nurses, and they just gave them to whomever needed them. As you probably know, most of the healthcare workers, what they did, and maybe they're still doing, they're covering their N95 with handmade masks or homemade masks, I'm sorry.
To protect them.
To protect the N95, since the N95s cannot be washed, as far as I know.
They're scared.
So,
yes.
Yeah,
trying to make them last longer. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, so here are the hand sewing again. Now, the one on the right is a digital collage. Like I mentioned before, I think I mentioned it, I photographed my process of doing especially the color monotypes, and then I upload them. Sometimes they're not even the photograph of the actual monotype, but the photograph of the process of the painting before the plate goes to the press. And then I've been doing these digital compositions. Now, the little girl with the doll, that is from one of my research. I believe she's either a Rohingya or a Yemeni refugee, but for some reason, this little girl really touched my heart. I've used her like in 3 different places. And she has her little doll, which is very old. And I dressed her differently, like the pants are really a silkscreen that I made. I photographed it and used that. But anyway, that became a tapestry, but it's not in the exhibition at Larson because of the scale of the figures is very different. Now on the left, shelter, you see the little girl again, that is in the exhibition at Larson. And which brings us to this is the exhibition Migrating Coastlines. These are some preparatory drawings, again, either from the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Doctors Without Borders, or what's the other one I mentioned, Human Rights Watch. And the one on the left actually is a drawing from migrants in a flood. You don't see it here in this drawing, but they were in a flood. So they were carrying their children on their shoulders.
Wow.
The one on the left is the plate itself. I'm painting on oil on the plexiglass plate, and then I'm using arches for oil paper. So, and a lot of the drawing actually is done with Q-tips. That's why you see Q-tips up there.
Oh.
Not the details, but yeah, the line part, yeah, it's done with Q-tips. That's why I left it there. Because you know, it's kind of fun. Anyway,
I'm sorry, Maria. I have a question. Someone's asking, obviously you have a very big interest in migration, and they're interested in your, what you think is the right way to migrate. They talk about legalities and, you know, we're in this political world right now. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, legality really deals with power, whoever's in power. Let's face it, the Holocaust was legal. Slavery was legal. The fact that women could not vote was legal. And even the 19th Amendment basically was for white women of certain financial class. Poor white women couldn't vote. Native Americans didn't get the vote until 1924, African Americans years later, and then of course we know about the Civil Rights Act. So, you know, legality is not necessarily morality. The right way, you know, I can tell you, if you're being bombed, if you're being flooded, if you're flooded, you're gonna leave. You're just gonna save your life and your family.
Right.
So you know, it's a complex. And also, by the way, I've heard stories, friends of mine, of their grandparents that actually left Europe with fake visas. there's a whole story about a Portuguese diplomat, Mendes, who gave out fake visas to the Jews because, a lot of people would just walk over the Pyrenees going to Portugal because that was a way of getting on a ship to come to the Americas. And not only the US, by the way, Latin America, South America is full of European immigrants.
Right.
And anyway, and this guy, he would just give him whatever visa. If Jews could not leave, well, here you go. Now you're not a Jew anymore. At least check, at least your visa. And I know of a story of a novelist, a wonderful Venezuelan novelist who's lived in Mexico for years. Her grandparents immigrated to Brazil with fake Iraqi visas. And her grandmother was Egyptian, and her grandfather, I believe, was Lebanese. If we really start digging, now I'm not against being legal, I'm not against that, obviously, but you also have to question when legality is moral and when it's always a question of power and a question of how we interpret words. Again, I go back to my interest in narrative and literature, the way that the law is written and the way it's interpreted. And if there's some lawyers out there, they certainly know better than I do.
Well, I think that's a really good answer. I agree with you. I mean, we look at the legality and we think of all the things that were not legal, slavery, women couldn't vote, civil rights, so there's all that doesn't mean it was right. So thank you for that.
We need, and I think I mentioned it because I took, I think I'm going to mention about the fact that according to the UN High Commissioner of Refugees, right now, 1% of humanity, 79.5 million people have been forcibly, and the word forcibly is very important, has been forcibly displaced from their home. So humanity, the US doesn't have a problem. Humanity has a problem. We have a problem, anybody. So how to fix it, my gosh, if I knew.
Right, and I like with this paint, you say, I'm an immigrant, so are you.
Yeah.
Or your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. So that's so true. Unless you were Native American that had this land, we are all immigrants of this land.
Yeah. So. Now the reason I'm showing these from two different series is because these two series kind of merge into what is now the exhibition at Larson. I started the I'm an Immigrant at the beginning of 2017. I did about 18 self-portraits. I got sick and tired of drawing myself, and these are all monotypes. The I'm an Immigrant, all of them are, except for the very last one, which was the first slide I showed, which is, of course, is not a monotype. It took me weeks and weeks to finish.
Right. I'm sorry, Maria, we're out of time.
Okay, so I
really enjoyed your presentation.
Okay. So we can go anymore.
I want to let people, if you stop sharing your screen, I can maybe get everyone to say hi to you.
Okay. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
That's your last picture of the art gallery. Okay, beautiful. That's actually of your exhibition, yeah.
Of the exhibition, and they're going to, in the chat, and this is, I have a story behind this, but well, you can ask me, send me an email. This is very important.
Yes. I put your website, marialino.com, so people can send you an email.
Yes, please.
But I'd like to see if everybody can just say hi. This is the flag, so you can talk about that really quick.
I really want to talk about it because Colette is also in this exhibition. So it goes back to the me sewing again, and the photograph that I asked people to take of themselves wearing a mask that I gave them. I only had time to make draw 6 of them, and then I made them into silk screens and I printed them. So these are the pieces of my flag, which I had 6 days to make. So
we'll really wonderful. I love them. I can't wait to see them in person. So, and just so you all know, it's the Camp Gallery in New River, and they're going to have appointments where if you feel safe enough to go, it will be limited on they'll have a few people allowed to go into the space if you feel safe enough. So,
Oh my gosh, I lost you. I'm sorry.
no, you're here. I see you.
Oh, now I see you. Okay.
So
Okay.
everyone, thank you so much, Maria. I love
Thank
your work. I love learning more about everything that you do and your view and your art making, and you're a very busy person. So I'm going to unmute everyone so that everybody can say hi to you. I don't know if it worked or not. Sometimes it doesn't work.
Fabulous, Maria.
Hi, Maria.
Thank you so much for participating. Any question you can just
Hey, Lisandro.
just email me from if you don't have my email, you can contact me through my website.
Hey, Perez, how you doing, Lisandro?
How are you?
Gracias, Maria.
Maria.
Maria Emiliana, it's
Hey,
Everybody. So
look at him driving and having his. I'm telling you, oh, Jacek.
that was Jacek, right?
Yeah, you know
Yeah, I'm still here. Okay.
You know that
We're
I
not
was
telling
his
anyone.
TA. You know, I was his TA. I used to drive him crazy.
Well,
What
thank
can I
you.
say?
So much. Thank
You guys.
Bye, bye.
Next week we have another. We have Susan Fistolano on her art talk next week, so I hope to see you all there. And again, thank you so much, Maria. Me and you. We'll talk later.
We'll talk later. Thank you so much.
Have a good night, everybody.